Hello from outside the SCL Stadium here in Reading, where Hull City have been beaten again in pre-season by 2-0, and that's 4 defeats from their 6 games. And they always say read nothing into results in pre-season, but I think what we can all read into what we've seen over the last month or so is that City are nowhere near ready for the start of the Championship season a week today at home to Bristol City. Funny enough, they actually started the game really well, and for the first half an hour they were dominant. They looked silky in possession. They created moments, a couple of really good opportunities that weren't taken. But once they conceded the first goal, it always felt like it would be a difficult path to tread to get back into the game. Oscar Estepina did have a really good chance early in the second half where he headed wide from Ryan Giles's pinpoint cross. But Reading pretty much went up the other end and through. Smith scored the second goal, a header that Pandor tried to keep out, but the referee's watch said it had crossed the line. So that's it. 4 defeats, 2 draws, no wins for Tim Walter in those 6 games, and 16 goals conceded and just 4 goals scored. Tells its own story, I guess. Now, look, as I say, a lot of people in football will say results mean nothing in pre-season, and that is true to an extent. But winning, and we've said this for years at Hull City, winning is a habit, and a good habit to be in. City haven't been in that habit. They've not won games in pre-season. They've not really looked like winning any games. And what would concern me is they've not looked like keeping any clean sheets in those 6 games. Yes, you can say that they played Fenerbahce, a team that are currently playing in Champions League qualifying. They played Newcastle, a good Premier League side, and a side that will expect to get to Europe this season. And they played Fiorentina, a side that have qualified for the Europa League Conference League final in 2 of the last 2 seasons. So they've played good opposition, but they've also played Kasımpaşa, who are a fairly average Super League team in Turkey. They've played Doncaster and lost 4-0. Admittedly, again, that was against Doncaster's under-21s for 65 minutes. And they've played Reading, a fairly okay standard League One side here today. But look, you can't get away from the fact this squad is nowhere near good enough. This squad, if you compare the squad to the one that finished last season, we've said before, that team scored, under Liam Rosenior, scored 68 goals. 63 of them have left. There's no Jadon Philogene, there's no Jacob Greaves, they've lost Fabio Carvalho, they've lost Liam Delap. It's there in plain sight, and they simply have not yet replaced those players. The players that have come in are Ryan Giles, that was an obligation to buy. Cody Drameh looked good for much of today's performance, and obviously Marvin Malem, who for the first 30-35 minutes looked bright, he looked energetic, he looked good on the ball, but again faded second half. They're just miles short, and you feel for the manager, because the manager was brought in to play attacking football. He was brought in to improve on what they did last season, but at this stage, as we stand here with a week to go, they are so far away from where they need to be. It's scary, and you can only deal with the current. You can't. What they may do between now and the window closing on August the 30th is fine. I expect that they will be very busy. I expect they will sign 6, 7, 8 players. Who they will sign, time will tell. They may well sign players of the calibre of Delap, of Carvalho, of Tyler Morton. We may see those players arrive. But as we stand here now with a week to go, those players are not in the building, and I can only deal with what's in front of me. And that team, as it stands, will struggle to stay in the Championship. I said it on the final day when we left Riva, that I felt that the squad was so far away from where it needed to be. That's 2 weeks ago now, and in that 2 weeks we've seen Cody Drameh arrive, and we've seen Marvin Malem arrive, and that's not enough. That squad is not good enough. And for a manager that wants to play open attacking football, 4 goals in pre-season and 16 conceded is a worry, isn't it? And I think even the most ardent, optimistic Hull City fan would struggle to argue. And I'm generally always kind of glass half full kind of person, and will always look for the positives in anything. And I think, and even I'm finding it difficult right now to be optimistic about what I'm seeing, because the Championship teams will just eat them alive. They play we actually had a disagreement, myself and the manager, because I felt that in transition they were far too open. He disagreed. He's the manager. He knows of course, he knows far more than I do. But watching 6 games, every time they've lost the ball, they've looked open. They've looked weak and easy to play against. And Reading's first goal was from transition. Once again, it came down City's left. Izaz should have done better with the initial ball into the box. He managed to get it under control a few seconds later, brought it back into the box, and the lad Elliott was not tracked. There was 5 or 6 City shirts around him, and he's been allowed to run on into the penalty box and stroke the ball into the far corner. The second one is a cross from the left hand side again to the back post, and the lad's got up above Alfie Jones and headed it a goal. Goalkeeper's done his best, I think. Pandora, he's tried to keep it out, but there was too much pace on the ball, and he was behind the line. So, there was one or two other moments. Reading didn't create a huge amount, but when they came forward, they looked to threat. They looked like they could create because City was so open. The left-hand side, I said it on Tuesday night, and I've said it before, is a big worry. They don't look solid. Matty Jacob doesn't look solid enough for where he needs to be. And Championship teams will exploit it. Championship teams are good. They're clever. And Bristol City coming to the MKM Stadium on Saturday will know that down the left-hand side, City, you can get at them, and they're weak, and they will target that. And better teams than Bristol City will do that again. And that is the concern. Going forward, they showed a lot more promise today, but Oscar Estepinian didn't look the kind of player that you want him to look. He was offside a lot. He had, as I say, had one really good chance from a great Giles cross in the second half, and he should have scored. He should have at least hit the target, but he glanced it wide. But apart from that, they didn't really create a huge amount. Simons hit a post, but the problem you've got is City were going 2-0 down in games. They're 2-0 down at Doncaster, went 3 or 4-0 down. Again, I'm careful not to put too much credence into that, because it was for much of the game. It was the under-21s, and it wasn't until the senior players came on, and by that point it was already 4-0 down. But 2-0 down against Newcastle, 2-0 down against Fiorentina, they had to come back. They've gone 2-0 down today, and they start creating a bit when they're 2-0 down, and that's not a particularly healthy trait to be going 2-0 down. And I can see it happening, I'm afraid. I can see there's a real soft underbelly through midfield. The way they are so cavalier and the way they are so open allows teams to get at them. And if a League One team in Reading are coming at their first team midfield and defence with such ease, what does that say about Championship defences? Championship attacks? I think they'll have a field day. So there's a lot of work to do. Again, I come back to it. I know you're joking on there about what fans are saying. You speak to people in football, and they will say that pre-season results mean nothing. They're just glorified training exercises played out in front of supporters. But I did speak to Nathan Tinsdale after the game, and I put it to him that winning's a good habit to be in, and it is. So look, they need players. That is the most obvious thing to say in the land. They need players. They need players in quick, but they still have to be the right players. They can't be panic stations and we'll sign anybody just for the sake of signing anybody, because that isn't going to help you. They still have to be the right signings. They still have to be players that are going to come in and make the team better. But you can't get away from the fact that the team, when you look at the team on the final day at Plymouth, the spine of that team: Tyler Morton, Alfie Jones, Jacob Greaves, Mika Seri, Philogene, Delap, Carvalho. There's just not that quality there. There just isn't, and it's really hard. But it's really hard to know what to say right now, because there's 4 weeks of the window left, and they will sign players, but they have to start signing them quickly, and they have to be good players. They've missed out on Thomas Asante, which was a big blow, and people will scoff and say, well, he only scored 11 goals for West Brom, he wasn't this, he wasn't that. And there are other good players out there. Thomas Asante isn't the only player that's out there, that's a good character that can come in and make a difference. But when you see him talking about joining an exciting squad like he is at Coventry, well, what does that say about Hull City? What does he know about what is his thinking about Hull City? Why is he not? Yeah, okay, Coventry's half an hour down the road. You know, he's not had to uproot his family. Coventry have been around the playoffs for a long time now. You know, in fairness, Coventry City are a more attractive proposition. They just are. They've got a better squad. They've been to playoff finals. They've been in FA Cup semi-finals, FA Cup finals, playoff semi-finals. You know, you feel like Coventry's squad is better. Coventry's squad is more mature. But City need to get players over the line. They have to start. They have to bring in better players, because at the minute we're going to struggle, and that is the frustrating thing. So hopefully in the next 4 or 5 days we see maybe 1, maybe 2 new arrivals. Time will tell on that. But Tim's also got to get to grips with the players he's got. You know, they're obviously working really, really hard. They're trying to learn a new system, and they've not had that long to do it. They've only been back in pre-season since July the 1st. There's an awful lot to take on, a lot of information, completely different playing style, and they're learning on the job. And obviously, this is the Championship, isn't it? And if they will get found out if they are not at it against Bristol City, if they're not at it down at Plymouth, if they're not at it against Leeds, Sheffield United. You know, all these teams, even Sheffield Wednesday in the Carabao Cup that comes up after Bristol City, they will get found out. And Peter Tan was there today. Tan and the other recruitment guys were all in attendance today. I know there's a question keeps coming in, and I keep being asked this about Ajun and Fenerbahce. And look, only Ajun knows. But what I would say is, I don't. He's obviously being pictured with new signings at Fenerbahce, and he's very active there. But he's also got people on the ground at Hull City. That, you know, he's got his football brain team, if you like, of Tan, of Mertan, Mustafa, Berry Pardo. They're here on the ground. They're the guys that are working day to day with the manager to try and bring players in. Ajun, obviously, as the owner, has overall say, and he's adamant that his Fenerbahce involvement is not taking anything away from Hull City. Admittedly, the optics of it don't, you know, particularly given where City are, don't look great. But I'm not convinced that his attention is being taken away from Hull City. I just think they're struggling to get players in. I don't think that's necessarily anything to do with Fenerbahce. It's just they are, for whatever reason, between the football hierarchy and the manager and convincing players to come is not easy. You know, Liam Rossini had a big part to play last year. He wasn't the only thing. Obviously, Lee Darnborough's gone as well. There's just been a huge amount of change at the football club, and it's going through a lot of change, and that can take time. And I think that there's no. I was speaking to somebody externally yesterday, and they were saying that the perception of City is that they are struggling to get players in, but. You know, struggling. They've got to do it. They've got to do it, because otherwise it's going to be a season of struggle. You can try and be as positive as you want, but until those players start arriving, it's all conjecture. It's all hypotheticals. It's all if, buts, and maybes. We can only deal in what we're seeing, and then the players. And I've said this after every single game of pre-season. The manager and the players need help. They need more players. They need good players, and if they're going to have any chance of competing, because as we stand now, you know, it's going to be a long season. The manager. I've just spoken to him. He wasn't overly happy, as you can imagine. He's a manager that is really hard to talk to after a defeat. He takes it personally. He takes defeat really, really hard, and he's spiky. He's really spiky after matches, and they've lost 4 of them in pre-season. So, but he did say that conversations are still cordial, are still positive with Ajun, with Tan. He doesn't know if players will be in before Bristol City. He hopes, but he doesn't know. Obviously. Again, it's difficult, isn't it? Because the feeling from some within the club was that on Tuesday afternoon, that Brandon Thomas Asante was a deal done. It was going to get done. They were really positive about that, and it didn't happen. So, you know, he's not going to be dancing in the aisles until the ink on that contract's dry and he's got that player in training. So I can understand his reticence, particularly given what's happened in the past week. He also thought he'd got a deal for Kiefer Moore over the line. That one obviously didn't happen. They've got to start getting players over the line, and good players. Michael, in terms of incomings, Oscar Zambrano is a deal they're trying to get done. Obviously, I know there's a lot of information coming out from Ecuador that he's going to play what looks his final game. So they're still hopeful of getting that done. It looks like it's now going to be a loan to buy. They still want Liam Miller, but as he's just said to me, Tim Walter, they need players all over the pitch. They need a goalkeeper for one. Although Pandor looked better today, could he have done better with the second goal? Could he? That's a difficult one. I've not seen a replay in real time. I thought it was a good save. Obviously, it proved it was just over the line. But they need a goalkeeper. That goes without saying. We're still not sure what's going to happen with Ryan Giles. Mika Seri isn't playing. He's not starting games. Certainly enough as he would like. And I wouldn't be surprised if we know there's interest from Saudi. There was a dubious link to Fenerbahce emerged from the Turkish media in the week. But I suspect that's one that will run throughout the month, throughout August. The Saudi window doesn't close until later into September, so that could go on for a little while. The midfield is not strong. Alex Robertson from Manchester City was a target, but it looks like he's going to Cardiff. They want Casey McAteer from Leicester, but Charlie Hughes, I know, played for Wigan today. He's still a player that they've got a strong interest in, and they're trying to. I think it's a big game of brinkmanship between City and Wigan, between trying to agree a fee. But what City have got to be careful of is, clubs now know that they've theoretically got a little bit of money in their pocket from the Jacob and Jayden sales, when in reality that's not quite how it works. City haven't got £18 million up front for Jacob Greaves. They haven't got 12-13 million pounds as it is once the clauses are taken out from Aston Villa. They're all structured payments. They get a bit now, they get a bit in a few months' time, and a bit over the duration, and it's all staggered. So it's not like they've got a big pot of cash swilling around. So, but clubs do see that and think, well, we can play hardball, we can demand more. That's the suggestion coming out of Switzerland, is that FC Basel are doing that with Liam Miller. They want more than what City are willing to pay. But there's going to come a point. It's easy for me standing here outside the stadium going, well, I'd just go to Fulham and pay £5 million for Jay Stansfield. There's a feeling, Birmingham have got the feeling that Fulham are going to let him go, that it might take between 5 and 6 million to get him out, but Birmingham in League One are prepared to pay that. Obviously they're under a different set of financial restrictions compared with everybody in the Championship. If it was me, I'd be going to Fulham and knocking on their door, or banging on their door and knocking it down and saying, look, we need a striker. Jay Stansfield is 21. He scores goals in the Championship. He's what we want. We'll give you £5 million. But it's not. Transfers don't work like that. It's not that straightforward. We're not playing Football Manager or FC24. Far more complex than that. But there is going to come a point where they're going to have to pay some money at some point and just bite the bullet and probably pay $1 million, $2 million more than what they feel a player is worth. If they feel that player is, if in Liam Miller's case they feel that Miller's worth $2.5 million and Basel are wanting 3.5, does there come a point when you bite your tongue and, right, okay, begrudgingly we're going to have to pay it because we want that player, we believe that player is good enough, and we get into a stage where it's becoming a problem. But it's easy for us on the outside to say that. It's different when you're working within financial fair play restrictions and you've got to balance, well, we've got a pot of money, we want that player and we want that player, but if we pay 3 million for a player that we think is only 2 million, valued at 2 million, then we've lost $1 million that we can't spend somewhere else. So it's a constant game of cat and mouse, and hopefully they can get a deal done with Wigan for Hughes, because I think that would be a big step. They need somebody else in midfield. Obviously the lad McConnell at Liverpool is an interesting one. McAteer is a winger. We have to wait and see what the prognosis on Ryan Longman is. He went off injured today. Abdush went off injured. Oscar got innocuous. That was Oscar and the goalkeeper. So we have to wait and see on those. But if you're looking at Longman out for a period of time, and he looked good today again. I think he's done himself no harm throughout pre-season. Obviously, we know Abdush is your creative influence. If he's out for any period of time, then it's so paper thin is that squad that that squad is so paper thin. You lose a player and you've got a problem. Ryan Longman could be out for a period of time. If he is, then that's a player you've lost. That's an outlet you've lost. You're then having to bring either a young player in or play somebody out of position that just isn't a right winger. And Longman has done well, and I thought he was probably his best player in that first half. So that's the worry when your squad is so thin. So Look, Luke, bleak is a strong word, isn't it? And I try, I always get accused of being too positive. That's just my nature. I try and look for the glass half full in everything, in life and in life in general. But this has been a testing couple of weeks, and it's hard watching a team that was so strong last year, that had a clear identity, that had after January had such strong strength in depth. To see what that squad has become now, it's really hard to watch, and it's hard to look forward and think, right, it's going to change markedly, because you don't know what's coming. As I said before, they proved in last summer, and they proved in January that they can go out and get good players. But until those players start actually physically arriving through the door, you don't know what you're dealing with. And what we're dealing with at the minute is a squad that is just not good enough. It's nowhere near good enough for 46 games of Championship football, let alone competing at the top end, which they're not going to be competing at the top end with what they've got at the minute. And that is, that's not just my opinion. That's what the manager's just said to me. So I can be accused of being pessimistic or negative and etc., etc. But that's the conversation I've just had with the manager, who agrees that the squad, if it stays like this, it's going to be a long season. So. Yeah, Darren, I think that was the message from Ajun, wasn't it, out in Turkey, was that they need to try and, not in so many words, but they need to try and muddle through August and get through to the end of the transfer window and see what it brings. August the 20th was the date they gave. August the 20th was the date that Ajun talked about, and that's because by that point Premier League teams would have played a game. They'll know largely what their squads look like, and from a loan point of view. But loans aren't just going to be the answer. You can't field your team just with loan players, because it's quicksand. They need to be signing 3 or 4 players that are their own, that give them a basis going forward for the next year or so, irrespective of what happens this season. Otherwise, we end up with a situation next summer where you lose 5-6 players again, and you've got a big turnover. So they need more signings, and that's why the Thomas Asante signing would have been a really good one for the relatively low amount they would have paid for him. He would have been their player for the next 3-4 years. So we'll have to wait and see, won't we? We'll have to wait and see. I think there's going to be a degree of negativity over the next 4 or 5, probably 3 or 4 days, and hopefully when we get to Thursday, there'll be a bit of excitement building for the first game. We do, yeah. Luke, I don't necessarily think he's distant. I think, look, you have to be careful as owners and people at the top of the football club. You have to be careful not to say too much, and not to be constantly in the media. I'd love it if Ajun did an interview every 3 days, or Tam was speaking to the media every 3 or 4 days. But what we don't need is what fans don't want to hear is we're going to do this, we're going to do that. What fans need is, we've done this. This is what we've done. Talk, sign players, and then talk. It's all right. Ajun could do an interview on Monday and go, right, this is what's going to happen, blah de blah de blah, and everybody goes, great. But if it doesn't happen, you're setting yourself up for a massive fail, and we've seen it before. So I guess part of me thinks the better option at the minute is to say nothing and let actions do the talking. Sign players, sign 2 or 3 players this week, and give the manager a squad that's worthy of the name. That's for me at the minute. That's the best possible talking that anybody can do. Is sign a player, go and sign a good player. Show that the club's got ambition. Show that the club is one that players want to come and join. That's the best thing you can do. That's the best words that you can use at the minute. Not doing more interviews saying we're going to sign X, Y, and Z, and then it not happen. Obviously, Ajun again touched on in Turkey about signing Yukuşlu. It was always considered a difficult one because of the salary, his desire to go back and play in Turkey. That was always viewed as a transfer that was unlikely. But he spoke about it. It didn't happen. We've obviously touched on Scott McKenna. Again, Scott McKenna was a player that was said to me a few weeks ago was unlikely because of his salary demands. There was a suggestion that I heard he turned down £35,000 a week at Cardiff. Now, with the best will in the world, City cannot be paying Scott McKenna £40,000 a week. That is just, and I would hope most fans of logical mind would think, well, yeah, that salary's a lot. That isn't sustainable for a club that are, are living on 20,000 gates. That we can't afford that, particularly if we want a competitive squad. Yeah, you might be able to pay Scott McKenna 35 grand a week, but then you can't pay, other players that you need of certain quality. So you also have to be sensible and not put the club's future at risk by signing players that, City have spent an awful lot of money over the last couple of years, and they are paying for that probably this summer. They spent an awful lot of money last summer and again in January. They had a real good go at it in January, and they fell short, and they are having to cut their cloth accordingly this summer. So, Luke, so this is a question that a lot of people are asking about Ajun's involvement with transfers. I don't feel that's any less than it was. There was only certain transfers in the past that he would get involved in. He wasn't involved in every single deal last summer. So again, I think that's an easy assumption to make, an easy criticism that people are levying at the owner, that he's not interested, he doesn't give a toss. I think that's untrue. I think that's extremely harsh. The conversations I've had with the owner, he's as passionate as he was the first day he took the club. He's constantly on the phone to the manager, to Tan, trying to get deals done. I genuinely don't believe that he's any less passionate than he was a year ago. Now there'll be some people that say you're naive. That's my belief from speaking to him and knowing and listening to conversations that I'm having with other people. He is as involved as he was before. Yes, his Fenerbahce involvement is much more public than it was, but he was still heavily involved with them. But ultimately, look, it's not my place to defend anybody here. It's not my place to stick up for anybody. These people are big enough and ugly enough to do it for themselves. What it comes back to is that Hull City need to go and sign some players, and I know that they're working hard. It goes without saying, they're on the phone all the time. Had a conversation just before I spoke to Tim with somebody that's involved, and they were, they felt that they were making good progress. But transfers are difficult for any club. You look at Chris Wilder was speaking last night after Sheffield United's game at Huddersfield. He's not happy with the amount of players that they've brought in. Paul Warne at Derby is another one that isn't happy with the amount of players they brought in. And that, I think PSR is having an impact both buying clubs and selling clubs. So the market is a difficult one. No clubs are doing a huge amount of business. And when I say a huge amount of business, I mean when you look up and down the Championship, the amount of quality players that are being signed, it's few and far between. You look at Malcolm Abue, he's just gone to Oxford. Well, we thought he was a really good signing for Hull City when he came from Palace on loan. It turned out to be a disaster. He's done absolutely nothing in his career since that loan spell at City. He's now gone to Oxford. Well, that's a completely unknown. He could be brilliant. He could be awful. Any deal is a risk, and we just don't know. And the market feels dead right now. Generally, all clubs. West Brom are now under a transfer, kind of like a soft embargo. They've got problems because of PSR. So all clubs are finding it really difficult to get quality deals done. Maybe not. Some clubs are getting quantity, but maybe not the quality. So City have got to be that club that go out and get quality and not just respond to the worry and the stress of supporters, which I get. I'm a fan myself. I understand I know what it's like. I know how we feel, and trust me, sitting up there watching it is hard because you've got to try and write 50 stories over the next couple of days, not trying to be objective, and it's hard when you see that the struggles they're having and the frustration of the manager that he's not got the players that he wants. And that's not a criticism aimed at anybody in particular. That's just a fact that they haven't got. I think if you spoke to Ajun, if you spoke to Tan, if they did an interview, I think they would say they're frustrated that they've not been able to bring in the players they would have liked. But that is the nature of transfers. They've got to keep going, they've got to keep working hard, and they've got to get them over the line. So that's probably it from the car park. I know people are joking about being in the car park again. Well, the problem is people within grounds, they kick you out really early. I love doing the videos like pitch side or in the stands, but ultimately, unfortunately, they kick you out so quickly that the car park is often the best bet. So that's it from here at the SCL Stadium. 1 week to go. The pressure is on. City against Bristol City in the Championship. First game of the season, number 1 of 46. Next Saturday, we will have the podcast for you, hopefully on Monday, get in touch. I feel like there will be plenty of comments at the 1904 Club, myself, Burnsy and Fletch, and hopefully a special guest. We're not going to have Prutz because he doesn't get back from holiday until Tuesday. But yeah, plenty to watch out for over the next few days. Fingers crossed, City can get 1 or 2 players in the door and we can all feel a little bit better. But no, take that away. The first game of the season is always exciting. 9 months of you don't know what's coming down the line, and hopefully City will get 1 or 2 over the line before Saturday and we'll all feel a bit better about things. Thanks so much everybody for getting involved as always. Plenty of stuff to come over the next few days, and if you can get in touch at the 1904 Club, we will have the podcast. Oh, just a quick shout out actually, if you've not seen it, we put out a special podcast with David Myler, which I recorded out in Turkey. Really good to talk to David, an absolutely club legend, a great character to talk to, yeah, a bit of a break from the stress of transfers. If you fancy listening to that, give it a go. And we'll be back on Saturday at the MKM Stadium with hopefully 3 points to talk about then. Take care everybody, thanks for watching.